And we explain the word umnum. And the word umnum is rooted in the word emunah. And what in fact is emunah? Pardon me. It is a misconception that emunah is an aftermath when you develop your seichel, and because you developed your seichel and you came to understand various truths, thus you reach the point where you've established certain principles, and that goes into the category of emunah. Emunah means steadfast. That is a misconception. Because emunah, just as the nefesh itself, life itself, is not of a developmental quality. Life doesn't develop. Life is a divine reality in the person, in the nefesh. Emunah is of similar category, except this is on a lower level, the conscious level. There is, even in our conscious awareness, a sense of something, of such profound and absolute reality that it is always steadfast, it doesn't budge. And all our activities, all our thoughts are based and surrounded and are drawn on against this emunah. As the Rambam expresses it in very simple terms. The Yisoid HaYisoid is the foundation of all foundations. Which means you build a foundation. On what basis are you building a foundation? What's going to support your foundation? It is to know that there is a first being. But knowledge, as we interpret knowledge, is something that you get to know by research and interpreting to various phenomenon and so forth. The Rambam says no. You see, the Amud HaChochmah is the pillar of Chochmah. He's laid that to know that there is a first being. This knowledge, in other words, of this first being, this precedes all investigative knowledge. What this is saying is that our knowledge, in our investigative knowledge, in our means of interpreting and understanding things, does not start from a vacuum. We don't start from not knowing. We start from knowing. But this knowledge that we know is a super knowledge. It's a knowledge that speaks about a motzui rishin. Motzui rishin, a first being which is not identified by investigation. It is a first being. It precedes all our investigation. And the reason that we begin to investigate, thank you, is because we know that there's a first being. There is what to investigate. There is where to go. There is what to do. And then afterwards begin to understand, okay, based on this, that there is a first being, what should be our life, what should our life be like? Perfectly reminiscent of Avraham Avinu's trajectory. He came out in a world that built a whole pyramid on nothingness. Avraham Avinu came back and he said, there is a fundamental error in the entire worldly thought. There is a first being. You don't have to create idols, principles, and to worship. There is a first being. You just have to understand what this, thank you, is expecting of you, what he wants, why he created the world. But there is a first being. This first being is of high principle. And our duty is to incorporate these principles in our daily activity. This was the simplest, this is the simple teaching of Avraham Avinu. And with it he confronted the entire world. This is the meaning of umnum. Recognizing that we possess this powerful insight, this powerful stance, upon which all our seichel is based. Therefore, we can go out and understand things which we cannot possibly explain, which cannot make sense of. But we know that it's there because we know it is there. Just like we know motivation. Now we're going to go into this next phase of this. I'm going to point out various things as we go along. Adayin tzorich lahavin. Yet still, there's something principally remaining that we have to understand. Tzorich lahavin. You have to understand. This tzorich lahavin is an aftermath of having explained that there are two principal levels, categories. It's called oyer makif and oyer pnimi. And the principal difference is makif encompasses everything equally. Does not distinguish between one aspect in existence to another, because it encompasses it. It does not relate. It does not relate to it by its criterion. It gives its own criteria. That's makif. Then there is pnimi. Pnimi is that which actually identifies with the criterion of the recipient. Excuse me. Very different type of expressions. And we said that under makif there are no differences. The highest of the high and the lowest of the low is encompassed and
to remain on this call, press
embraced by the very same makif. The very same principle, absolute truth of motivation is identifiable and recognizable at every level. Having said that, the Rebbe says, umnum, however, think back to the principle of knowledge. Adayin tzorich lahavin. We still need to re-understand. But is it not? Yesh makifim protim. There are individual makifim. Liprote ho'elamis. that pertain, that are makifim, to the individual worlds. Let me have to spell. These makifim protiim liproti ho'ilomis, there are many makifim, and they're not all equal. And we can instantaneously identify with that because we have it right there in our own experience. We have a room, we have an apartment, we have a house, we have an environment, a neighborhood, a city, a state. Each one of these are different makifim, of different quality makifim. Each one pertains to a different aspect of our activity, of our orientation. This is just kind of an introduction. So the Rebbe says they're makifim protim, the proto ho'ilomis, ukmoi, as kesed atzilus. We know that there is atzilus. Atzilus begins. Atzilus itself starts from chokhmah, 10 spheres, but above that there is a keser. There's that which is called a crown. The crown means that which encompasses, which surrounds, and essentially coronates it. It gives it a superior sense. This crown, usually, as we're going to see, is identified with Rotzen and Oinen. As we shall be introduced, we'll just see. Just want to, because this is not new to us. Rotzen is more powerful than Chokhmah. And yet, there is not a basis. There's not a means to understand what is its basis, where it's coming from. It's a principal truth. Kesed Atzilus. There's a Kesed Atzilus, which means to say, even though Atzilus can, so to speak, justify itself, fend for itself, like Chokhmah, Bina, Das, and all the other spheres, nonetheless, the real basis, the real power behind it, the real message behind it, is the Keser that is above it. Prior to identifying Atzilus, we have identified something which is of superior quality, of a primary truth. Within these primary truths, there are many different levels. This is called Makifi. Kesed Atzilus, the Kesed de Bria, then Bria also has a Kesed. And then there is a Kesed Atzilus. That's here. So what this is saying is this. Atzilus, Bria, Asiya. Three distinct levels. You may think that Atzilus justifies to have a keser. Atzilus recognizes the divine truth. Chochma bin Vadas. Chochma de Atzilus recognizes the divine truth. Bria is of a different ilk completely. It's a creation. As such, it begins from a created level, not from a keser, from a primary reality. It is a creation. And yet we say no. There is a primary reality that provides for the presence and the substantiation of Bria. All the way down to Kesed Asiya. Even Asiya. Even Asiya, which is essentially our world, the world of deed of action. Asiya means that which is made. It becomes real only after you make it. Even there is an element of keser. These ksorim, we may be able to identify the individual ksorim as they are relating to the actual world. Bria, Itziro, Asiya. But actually the Rebbe says no, he goes higher than that. Shezehu madreges protiyos. This refers to madreges protiyos, to individual madreges, bevchinas, makiv ha'elyon. At the level and in the aspect of makiv ha'elyon, the superior, the makiv, the uppermost makiv. Shemakiv l'chol ha'ilom, that is makiv every world, according to the erech, according to the measure of that particular world. And this makiv ha'elyon, in this superior makiv, supreme makiv, there is a cognizance of various levels within the development of world. And in there is a recognition that there is the level of Atzilus in world environment. There's a level of Bria in world environment, and there is a level of Asiya in world environment. And these are all real worlds to the extent that this Makiv Ha'elyon can identify between each one of these as pertaining to a certain level of Makiv, a certain level of principal reality, principal truth, of a Makiv. Makiv means not only as an aftermath, as a result of your shortcoming, you have to provide for this or that. No, from a positive perspective. From a positive perspective, there's a phenomenon of an asiya that also calls for a makif, for keser. Even as there's a phenomenon of atzilus that calls for a keser, there's a phenomenon of asiya, which also calls for a keser. And thus, this identifies madregos, different categories within the element of makif itself. We finish saying that makif does not distinguish between one level and another level. It is makif, everything, all the entire reality, b'shava equally. And then we turn around and we say, wait a second. Every level has its own reality and therefore has its own makif. Clearly there is much to expose over here, to explain. But just on the start, when we reflect, and we're required to reflect from a truth perspective, what if a human being were perfect on his intellectual level, and did not possess the emotional level, did not possess the functional level? There would be something fundamentally missing. Which means that the various levels that comprise the human being are essential levels, meaning they complement, they make him a full, they complement, they add something, they make him more real. If we were able to understand on the seichel level, but not able to relate to the practical level, there would be something fundamentally missing, a shortcoming. If one understands that you have to come forward and help the poor, and he understands it full well, and he has full sympathy with the poor, but he does not have the capacity, that level of recognition, of going out and actually helping him out. We would think that it's an automatic thing. If you have sympathy, automatically it will result in a practical involvement. But that's not the case. These are two distinct levels. And each one has its own keser, its own reality. There are people, as we know, excuse me, who are involved day in, day out in their sleep about building institutions of assistance, of helping people, practical institutions, public kitchens, and so forth. And then there are people who are focused on making yeshivas. A completely different phase of human interest. Each one is a kesed in its own. And here is the point that I want to emphasize. This thing that's a kesed in its own should be understood correctly. And that is, one can say that this one is engaged in making yeshivas, providing for education of children, because he has mercy on the children who do not get an education. In other words, it comes from the very same source as mercy for the hungry. He needs something, so I go and give him whatever he needs. That's what I'm praying. He needs education, I give him education. He needs food, I give him food. That is not the whole story. It's not even the beginning of the whole story. In order to make a yeshiva, one has to perceive the fundamental truth and reality and the necessity of this education. It is not because there are people begging for it, so he gives it to them. Even as when one responds to the hungry. That is more difficult perhaps to project, but the truth is, somebody is concerned about the hungry, he is overtly concerned about the hungry. Not because the hungry show their pain, but he's really going out of his way to make sure that everybody gets what they need. He feels a responsibility, so to speak, to the community, to the world, to provide what's needed. Therefore, there is a makif, a kesed, at each level. This is an exposure to the Sinyan that from our own little world, from our own experience. There's a Yaman over here who was, RASHAB was successful in his business. Ben Abu. It became such a household word. Everybody, I'm sure, knows about Ben Abu. The latest thing that Ben Abu is doing, he got himself a huge house with all kinds of accommodations, and this house is used by many people to arrange for a bris milah. It has everything that's needed to make a bris. Not only that, he provides everything that's needed. He pays for the meal, he pays for the food, he brings the waiters to set it up. He does everything. You need a bris, you come to a fait complete, to a finished environment. It's all ready for you.
Truly,
What?
I don't know what he does, but he does a lot of more things. He does.
Okay, I'm just giving an example. So, when he does this kind of thing, is it because he feels the pain of a person who needs to make a bris? Or is it a proactive thing? that he is making something something real. Not because the person is at a loss. How am I going to make a bris? This is the point that the Rebbe says every madrige has a makiv, has a keser. Atzilus has its own keser, Bria has its own keser, Atzilus has its own keser. In other words, there is some kind of a mental value that there be asiyah. What is asiyah? Asiyah means the world of action. And asiyah means the world of action, which means that in asiyah, nothing occurs just because it is the right thing to occur. It happens only because you actually get involved practically and you do it. A table will not come into a house just because it's needed and it's the right thing that the house should have a table. It's not going to happen until you take the table in your hands and bring it into the house through the door and put it in the place where it belongs. That's what I see. This too has a keser, has a makif of its own. Third line from the beginning. It embraces every world according to the level, according to the measure of that world. You can't overwhelm the world to the point where the world loses its worldliness. The embrace has to be embraced that provides for the world to be a world, not for the world to lose its worldliness. For example, you want to help out the poor, and you want to provide for their needs. In your grace and your abundance, you go in and you take a pauper who is collecting pennies and give him $1 million. Wonderful. This guy doesn't know what to do with it. You have not provided him within his orientation.